Welcome back to my adventures, where every adventure is unique. Today we'll be discussing the Tour du Mont Blanc, my experience, risk and rewards, part 2. Before you go, I strongly suggest you do some training, unless you're a seasoned and strong hiker. If you're not, I would strongly recommend a rather strenuous training regime before you go if you want to have success hiking the tour. Purpose being to strengthen your musculoskeletal load-bearing capacity, and then also to condition your ligaments and your tendons. 3 months before traveling, I basically took my rucksack and I took some empty milk jugs, filled them up with water. I started off with about 10 kilograms in my backpack. I've got it's about a 75 to 100 millimeter hill near where I live, and I basically would do ascend and descend hikes on this hill for about an hour. I did 12 rotations over an hour, and I did that over 3 months just to get this conditioning in on my body, to make sure that I would have a good base to build off of. So the carrying weight, I had a 40-liter backpack, and the carrying weight was 11.74 kilograms. So another good thing to train with a higher weight is when you do actually start the tour with your actual carrying weight. If it's lower, it's going to feel lighter. Whereas if you're carrying the exact same weight, it won't feel that, you won't have that sort of benefit that you get when you train with a higher weight and then come down and actually carry with a lower weight. So I recommend anyone to consider that as a good strategy. It worked for me. The other thing is, when you're carrying a heavier load, you develop good proper hiking kinetics and posture, so you don't end up looking like this guy. And that's kind of what, if you don't train, you'll feel like you're carrying a house on your back, and you'll be all hunched over and struggling to do the tour. Whereas if you get some training in, that load won't feel as heavy, and your posture and your kinetics will be better suited. You'll get used to having a load-bearing distribution in your rucksack on your body, and then your endurance to survive or last 6 to 12 hour hiking days will be up to the task. And that's going to benefit you for sure over the trail, and something that you need to consider before you go. Stair climbing with the loaded rucksack is something else I did. I had 6 flights of stairs in my building, and I would do 5 rotations of that, and then did 30 squats with that rucksack weight at the top each time. So that was something else I was doing 3 months before I traveled. And then what I didn't do, probably I should have done, was some endurance hikes, 20 to 40 kilometers. Not necessarily with that weight, but certainly, say, a 12 kilogram weight in my pack. Whether that's on flat ground or rolling hills, if that's all you have available, it's better than nothing. It just gets your endurance up. So that's one thing I didn't do, but I probably should have done. And like I say, if you can find moderate to hilly regions, if they're available, and then try and do that at least once a week, 4 to 6 weeks before you go. So that will get your endurance up. This will get your body conditioned for the load, and your posture and your tendon conditioning doing those hills and stairs. I also worked on my cardiovascular. I was doing commute cycling, so I did about 2,200 kilometers in 5 months before I went. I did walking on the weekends. I did 2 Saturday and Sunday. I would walk at least 10 kilometers or more. I did some jogging. The other thing you should consider is like calisthenics. You need a lot of flexibility when you're hiking the tour. If you're someone who's not very nimble, you may want to consider doing some flexibility exercises, some calisthenics, stretching your legs and your back daily, because you're going to be faced with scrambling and hiking problems to solve. on the trail where you need to overextend and bend and twist to get through certain sections, and you certainly want to have that flexibility. Even on descents, sometimes it's critical to have that when you're doing steps, rising or dropping. That's going to help you out. If you're a little bit stiff in that regard, you may find you're pulling muscles or legs or back muscles, and that's something you want to obviously avoid. I did other strength exercises just like squats and push-ups, not with loads, just basically squatting myself using my body weight. Would do sets of those before I went at work. Again, just to get some strength in my legs and arms and overall body strength. Another regime you should consider is healthy eating and try to lower your body weight. There's some calculations to carry 1 kilogram up 1,000 meters. You need 9,800 joules of energy. And you can imagine if you have, say, 10, 20, 30 kilograms overweight, and you have to burn and generate that much energy, and then you've got 10,000 meters up and 10,000 meters, so you got 20,000 meters. So do the math. You got 30 times 20 times this number. Tells you how much additional energy you have to generate to lift that load over those mountains. So I would strongly recommend getting into a good healthy eating regime before you go, and lower your body weight as much as possible. There's a trend in hiking these days for ultralight gear, and what I'm calling body fit is basically getting your body weight down. There's lots of people willing to spend thousands of dollars or pounds to buy ultralight gear just to save a kilogram in their rucksack. What I'm suggesting is, focus more on getting body fit, lose your 10 to 30 kilograms of body weight, whatever you have that's excessive. And, it just doesn't quite make sense to me that, people try to buy their way always, instead of doing the effort, putting in the time and losing the weight, eating healthy. Start at least three months or 6 months, depending on your condition. Before you go, you're going to need it. Even in the shape I was in, I still put in 3 months of exercise before I went. So like I say, train for 3 to 6 months before you go. Depending on your fitness level, you'll never regret being too fit. So, it's not a question of I train too much. You'll never train too much. You'll never be too fit for the tour. It's very demanding. As always, develop a strong core. That's where you get your power in carrying the loads. If you're going uphill, your core strength is going to be important. Also coming downhill. So don't neglect your core. Make sure you get a strong core in shape as well, doing sit-ups, and you're going to need that as well. Take your fitness seriously. Otherwise, you will suffer and you will be miserable on the tour. I saw a lot of people who were and not really enjoying themselves. And, it's at least 11-day hiking tour. So, you have to do this exercise day after day after day after day. It's cumulative, and if you're not in good shape, you're going to really start to suffer and feel it as the tour. And a lot of people end up having to either stop the tour or get injured, and basically it ruins your tour. So if you don't put in this sort of preliminary effort and get yourself in shape, you're going to probably regret not doing that, and the entire tour could be a bad experience for you. So there are there's websites and YouTube videos. One of them I found was the Hiking Club, and it's Prepare Your Body for Hiking in the Alps. So you can consult lots of online stuff to see what exercises you should do, where you should get your body strong, what sort of regimes you should use. This is the one I used, but feel free to consult the experts and find out what they have to say and how to go about doing it. But definitely training before you go is, I would say, your key priority. 3 to 6 months before you leave is not unrealistic, depending on your fitness level. But otherwise, you're not going to enjoy yourself. Again, this is not for experienced hikers who are hiking all the time. This is for the rest of us who aren't really either first and foremost hikers, or just sort of casual hikers who do hiking on and off. So that was what I implemented, and I think it worked out quite well in hindsight. My day one, I went from Les Houches into Refuge des Miages, and I started at 1,007 meters. And this is the profile, by the way. You can see the map here, and this is the profile of the course for that section, starting from A and then ending in Miage. And I took that up to Col Vosa at 1657. The maximum gradient was, just to give an idea, the maximum gradient here was 27%, so quite stiff to walk up. And then I did the variant 1A from Col Vosa to Col du Tricot at 20 meters, so more climbing from 1657. And then from Col du Tricot, I went to Refuge Miage at 1560. There's a very steep descent here with a maximum gradient of 38% decline. So you can see here it's extremely sharp and steep. And then I stayed in the field. You can basically see the Dôme des Miages, which is right here. So you're at 1567, and you're looking up at the Dôme des Miages, which is 3637. So it's a spectacular view right in the Refuge Miage. This is the decline from the Col de Tricot is up here, and this is the decline or the descent that you take to get to the Refuge des Miages. It's pictures never really give a good indication of steepness. It looks steep here, then you can imagine it's twice as steep in real life. It's very, very precipitous descent here. It's one that I wouldn't recommend doing in the rain. It would be quite dangerous, basically for slipping and falling. There's a lot of loose debris it zigzags down, and there's a lot of loose debris. It's very narrow and twisty, and there's lots of boulders. It's easy to trip and slip, and it's quite dangerous to go through here in the rain. So if it's raining, you wouldn't take the haute route, you would take the low route. If it's dry, yeah, I definitely recommend it. It's a nice experience. The good thing you get to do is you get to see the suspension bridge, which is around this section. It's quite long. It's kind of like a Himalayan style cable and board. It's tremendous standing in the middle of the bridge and looking up at the water rushing down, and then taking the view and seeing where it's going. It doesn't look like it's very steep here, but it's actually quite steep. There's a large volume of water rushing through, and you got a little bit of a mist and a spray, and the sound, it's quite amazing. If you're nervous about suspension bridges and there's a lot of people around, just let them pass first before you go. You will get the oscillations from other people walking will start to transfer through the bridge, and it will sway quite a bit. So if that makes you nervous, just wait for other people to go through. In September, it was quite few hikers, so when I went through, there was no one coming. And I spent quite a bit of time standing in the middle of it and enjoyed it. I don't have a problem walking with suspension bridges, but if you do, you can always sort of gauge your timing to get over without other people coming. And this is the famous arch in Les Houches, where you walk under, and that's your start and end point. So that was day one. I did 1260 meters of ascending and 700 meters of descending over 14 kilometers. I was probably a bit disappointed in the distance. I think I should have averaged probably 17-18 kilometers a day. So I was off pace, which was a bit concerning. But I think a lot of this had to do with not having any sleep the night before in the airport. And so I was hoping for a better day on day two, but still a bit concerned that if that was, going to be my average, I was going to, if I do that for 10 days, I'm still 30 kilometers short. So I was a bit concerned about that number. When I got into the refuge, there's a bivouac there. So there's the chalet Miage, there's refuge Miage. So the chalet is for, people, wealthier people. The refuge is for people who want to sleep in huts. And then there's the bivouac d'air, which is where I pitched my tent. There was probably about 7 or 8 people. It's down in this section. You can see the field starting here. There's probably about 7 other 7 or 8 other hikers who were joining me in that field. And then, like I said, you had this tremendous view of the Dôme des Miages. The mist was rolling in. It was incredible, a really incredible first day. I got in at around 5, and then I had my tent and stuff pitched at 6, and I literally slept from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. the next day, so I had 12 hours sleep, well worth it. The weather in Les Houches, when I left around 9:30, was, I would say, about 21 degrees C. It was partially sunny. It started to cloud up when I got to Colvosa. I had lunch there, and there's a cafe up there because there's a cable car that you can take if you don't want to do this initial hike. And you get to the cafe. I had lunch there. There's a water stop. You can get water in your bottle, and then you carry on up and up to the Col de Turcot, and then you do this quite dramatic drop. You can see the zigzagging here until you get to the refuge. I do have some numbers on how long it took to get down here. I think it was a little over an hour and 15 minutes. So it just gives you an idea of the descent. Is quite precipitous here. And there is another cable car from there that goes up further. Obviously, I didn't take it. There's a Bellevue, I think, is one of the spots, and there's another. It says Mont Lachat. I think the cable car goes up quite high. It's a spectacular view. If you've got time and money, you can certainly take that. But I just simply hiked up and carried on. There were actually more people coming down as I was hiking up. There was only a few people who took the variant. Most of them were going through the low route to get to Lake Contamine, which is down here. There's only a few people taking the high route, and there seemed to be more people coming in the opposite direction, doing the clockwise, because this is counterclockwise. They were doing the clockwise direction. I'm not sure why that was, but that was the case. And that's about it for the day one. It was overall a positive day. It started to drizzle right when I got down to the end, and then there was rain overnight, but it was sort of light rain and periodic. In the morning, the rain stopped. The temperatures in Refuge Miage, I think it was around 12 C at night, so it was quite pleasant to sleep. There was no problem with sleeping, and overall, like I say, partially sunny, starting to overcast, pretty much overcast the rest of the way, and then it drizzled as I got in. The other thing is when you do passes and cols, the wind always picks up quite strong. And prior to arriving at the col, I had to put my jacket on to break the wind, simply because it was so cold. You get that sort of cooling effect when the winds are that strong. So I ended up putting my jacket on because it was quite cold at the top. There's a lot of turbulent wind going through here, and just something to keep in mind. Putting clothes on and off to keep your thermal body management is important to make sure that you're comfortable and not in sort of any you could get. That's what I was concerned about. I was concerned actually about getting a cold, because getting sick, because the temperature drops so much with that cooling effect of the wind. So these are the things you have to keep in mind when you're hiking. The other thing you have to remember is you're not immune to hazard. Things can go wrong. You can get a twisted ankle or a wrenched knee on the trail quite easily. If you slip or you trip, you could be looking at broken bones, an ankle, a leg, an arm, or a wrist. If you fall, you could be looking at arms or wrists. If you slip, you could be looking at ankles and legs. When you're descending, you're prone to slipping. There's a lot of loose rock available. And then, depending on where you land, you could get cuts. It's rocky terrain. Could result in bleeding or even heavy bleeding. And then the question is, you may need to get rescued. When you're ascending, you're concerned with things like falls. The gradients around are usually exposed and steep, and it's sometimes the mountain faces are rocky and tree covered geography. It's quite easy. If you fell, you're going to get quite badly injured, and then you could also, depending on where you end up, you could go missing. The mountain rescue, if you call, it's for some reason they have 3 different numbers. I don't know why. It doesn't seem to make too much sense, but in France, I believe it's 112. This is going by the Cicerone guidebook. In Italy, it's 118, and then in Switzerland, it's 144. So depending on where you are, you may have to call different numbers. If you do need a rescue, there are helivacs around, but they're quite expensive. You're thinking about, on average, 8,700 euros. So you have to keep that in mind. Depending on your location and the injury, and how difficult it is to extract you out of that location, these costs will climb. Obviously, if they're there for longer, or they need more people, or they have to do some special arrangement to actually extract you from your position, you could be in some densely wooded area, or perhaps in some rock location that's challenging to get you out. If you have a broken leg and you're stuck in some crevice, there's all different situations that will increase this cost. And then the other thing you have to remember is that once they get you out, you're going to be in hospital, and the question is, what's your coverage for a foreign hospital, whether it's in France, Italy, or Switzerland. A lot of people will, believe that they have travel insurance, and so they're covered for everything. And I'm going to caution you that travel insurance is a lot like a product warranty. You really need to read the fine print before you buy the policy, not after. Make sure you're getting what you think you're getting, and then really consider what costs could be incurred when you have a rescue in the mountains. Do some research on it. Ask what the policy covers, and read the fine print. A lot of them, because there's so many mountain rescues and they're quite costly, a lot of insurance policies will say they cover that, and then when you read the fine print, they have lots of, as all insurance policies have, they have lots of fine print that says, well, we only cover you up to a certain altitude. So if your injury incurs over 1,000 meters, we don't cover it. So let's say you get injured at 1,200 meters, the insurance policy says, whoops, you're too high, we're not going to cover it. Depending on location, your policy may only cover France and Switzerland and not Italy. So again, it's going to depend on where you're injured. You have to make sure you got a location for all 3 countries at altitudes that you expect to go. So I would say up to at least 3,000 meters. And then distance, remarkably, some of them will say, well, what were you doing? I was doing the Tour du Mont Blanc. Well, that's 170 kilometers. Well, we only cover hiking trips for 50 kilometers. So, this is the way they get it. They get you. They'll come up with these little limits or ranges, and they'll say, well, your hike was too long. We don't cover you for anything more than 50 kilometers. And then another trick that they do is they have coverage ceilings. So they'll say, well, yeah, we cover mountain rescues, but only up to 1,000 euros. You just spent over 8,700 euros, and they only cover up to 1,000. So, your insurance policies are basically, they're not what you think you are. And if you do need them, you could come up back with a very heavy medical expense and rescue. You could be up into the 15,000, 20,000 euros here quite easy, or more, up to 100,000 euros, simply because your travel insurance policy wasn't what you thought it was. So I highly caution people to really go deep on reading what those policies are and what costs need to be covered, and if there's any fine print to limit what the coverage is. Most policies will try to get away from paying. They know all about the rescues for mountains and what it costs, and they're going to put all kinds of little fine print to get away from having to pay or pay very much. So keep that in mind. And the other thing is fatality. People do die hiking the Tour du Mont Blanc. So keep that in mind. It's not a risk less tour. It is quote unquote safe. You'll see that online a lot, but what is safe. People die hiking the Tour du Mont Blanc. It's not just sort of a trying to put fear into people, but you have to realize that there are possibilities that you could die simply because of falls and other incidents. But it's not safe in terms of risk free. There are risks that you have to take in mind, and you have to make sure you're putting some thought into that. You're not seeing this in the other YouTube videos because they don't want to talk about it. But these things are things you have to keep in mind, and we'll show you a bit of support. This is from the Tour du Mont Blanc Mountain Rescue Facts. Again, stuff that you don't see. There's the website if you wanna go on to it. It's the Tour du Mont Blanc Rescue. This is where I got the information from. On average, there are around 100 deaths each year in the Mont Blanc Massif. That doesn't mean 100 hikers. There's skiers, there's climbers, but in general, on average, they're dealing with 100 deaths each year. You don't hear about them on the YouTube videos, but that's the truth. Mountain Rescue does on average 4 or 5 rescues on a normal day and up to 18 on a busy one. So that's how many times the helivacs are out over the tour rescuing people. So it gives you an idea of kind of what the volume of people and the amount of rescues that are having to occur. So it's not this question that everybody's safe. If it's so safe, there wouldn't be this many deaths and this many rescues all the time. In July 2007, there were 30 deaths. So basically a death a day over the month. And because it's July, it wasn't skiers. It was basically climbers and hikers. And hikers account for 68% of all rescues. That's a fact that you need to drive home. It's not the climbers who are getting most of the rescues, it's the hikers. Climbers and hikers account for 100% of the rescues between May and November, because obviously there's no skiers. And climbing has a higher fatality to injury risk. If you're a climber and you make an error, you're probably falling to your death. So you're looking more at a fatality case instead of an injury case, whereas hikers, it's probably more you're going to get injured before you get killed, but you still can get killed. The other thing to keep in mind is that hikers go missing. It's easier to go missing. You've got 170 kilometers of route, and you'll probably be presumed dead because they can't find you. Whereas climbers, they basically are on a route. If they fall, it's not so difficult to find the body. Whereas if you're a hiker and you go missing and you fall down a mountain face, your chances of going missing and being presumed dead are higher, simply because there's so much more geography to cover. Where do they look? Where do they find you? It's not like you have a GPS beacon on yourself. Maybe you should carry one. If that may be something to consider. 20,000 people attempt the Tour du Mont Blanc each year, so there is a high volume of people. And you could say, well, the rescue ratio to people is low, but that's over the entire season. There's obviously not 20,000 people on the tour at one time, but over the season there's 20,000 people who attempt it. One number I found a bit surprising was there's 20 to 30,000 people attempt to climb Mont Blanc or the Mont Blanc Massif mountains each year. I thought that was higher than I expected it to be. So here's a breakdown again. The hikers are 68% of the rescues. The climbers are only 2%. You would think the climbers would be being rescued more often, but actually there's only 2%. And then during ski season, there's 30% of rescues are for skiers. The 4 main causes of rescue are falls. So when you're falling, and again, this is going to be hikers more than climbers, although climbers will be in there, but it's probably mostly hikers who are falling. Incidents of rock fall or avalanches. That's probably impacting climbers more than hikers, but there is incident of rock fall that you have to be aware of, and obviously incident of avalanche can occur as well. These aren't things that you have too much control over. Quite frankly, it's sort of a time and space thing. If you're in the space at the wrong time, you're simply going to get caught up in these, and there's really not a lot you can do. If an avalanche is coming at you or you're caught in a rock fall, it's more of a circumstance. Whereas falls is something you have a bit more control over. The other factor is weather and navigation. That's the third cited factor that had a bearing. Again, weather is a big impact, and getting lost. So weather being thunderstorms, hail, or snow, and navigation basically getting lost. And that's not climbers, that's hikers getting lost. And that's causing rescue helicopters to come out and bail them out. The other one, which again is probably the hikers, is unpreparedness, lack of fitness and gear. People who go on the tour and don't, they underestimate the challenges, and they overestimate their abilities, and that's where this is coming in. Lack of fitness. Again, as I said before, making sure you're trained, having good gear. You don't have to have expedition gear or high quality, expensive gear, but you do have to have good gear. I saw quite a few people on the tour with, I would say, subpar gear, and it was simply, it's stuff that's, you can purchase at a corner store, and it's great for a one night overnight in a in a nice sunny day. But on the tour, you're going to get a lot of weather variation. You're going to get rain. You're going to get thunderstorms. You could get hail and snow. So your variability in your temperature and weather is quite extreme, and you have to have gear that's going to be up to that task. And then unpreparedness, again, not having hiked in mountains and not being prepared for it by doing enough research before you go. These are the four causes of rescue and fatalities in the Tour du Mont Blanc that you need to be aware of. What I call wham syndrome, it won't happen to me. You can see some of the headlines. If you Google it, you'll see that hikers are falling to their deaths more frequently than you're probably aware of, simply because it's not reported in the YouTube videos that you've watched. They show the rewards and not the risks. There's an article written, it's called "I Fell Down a Mountain While Hiking the Tour du Mont Blanc." I think everyone should read that article. Obviously people who are skilled hikers, experienced hikers, I'm not, that's not who I'm talking to. I'm talking to everyone else. Read that article. It's a great idea, a great example of how things go wrong, and then, how accidents happen. And then in this case, she was lucky enough to get rescued, but I would say her chances of survival were quite low. She just happened to have something go right for her, and she was able to get herself rescued. But this is a great article to read. It's a real reality check, I think, for a lot of people on what you need to be prepared for. So basically what happened is she was on the tour and she got lost, and she thought she was on the path, and she wasn't, and she kept going. And then, she then kind of realized she was lost, and then she kept pushing further instead of backtracking until the point where she literally fell off the side of the mountain and fell down at the side of it. And as she says here, I don't know how long or far I fell, but it was a while. So she fell quite a distance, and as she was sort of falling, she was thinking to herself, I'm falling, I'm still falling, I need to stop. And then sort of exclamations. And she eventually bounced off some trees, and then grabbed a tree branch and a plant root to stop from falling further. And so there she was, suspended in space and time on the rock or the mountain face, probably in relatively dense foliage, the forest sort of area, and she was injured. She had some cuts and bruises on her landing, and then she's literally holding a plant root and a tree branch from falling further. So how does she get out? She's injured, and she can scream. You're talking, maybe she fell 100 meters plus, possibly here or more. It's hard to say. She herself doesn't know, but she can scream all she wants. She was already off the trail. And no one's going to hear. The trail is not that densely populated in September. You could. There were times I was hiking where I didn't meet anybody for 2 or 3 hours. That's sort of the density. And other times you might come across, several people in a short period of time who are bunched up together. But often there's hours that go by with no one. And so she could be screaming. and never be heard by anybody. The other thing is, you got food and water, and she's cut, so she's bleeding, she's bruised, and then she's not even in a place where she can climb up or climb out. So she's literally stuck on the side of the mountain. The thing that saved her was her cell phone. And there's a few things of the cell phone, in this case relying on the cell phone, is that she had to get a signal. She had to call the mountain rescue. They had to respond to her. They had to locate her with a GPS system. They had to then fly to find her, and she was in a densely wooded area, so it was difficult to see her from the air. Her cell phone didn't get damaged while she was falling, and it didn't fall out of her pocket while she was falling. So there's like 6 or 7 things there that had to go right for her to get rescued. So I would say her probability of getting rescued here was probably less than 5%. Circumstances fell in her favor, but I would say it was probably less than 5%, and more likely even less than 1% that she was going to survive. I mean, she obviously survived the fall, but to get rescued was, it was quite amazing that she was rescued, and it just happened that she was able to call, and they found her and pulled her out. But I think everyone should read that article. It's online, and it gives you a good idea what you need to be aware of when you're hiking. During the time, the Alpine police have kept records, and 280 people have gone missing in the area. So it's not just people who are known to have fallen and died, it's or be injured. There's 200 and other people who have gone missing, as I said before, and she would have been 281 if it hadn't been for the circumstances that were in her favor. So that's how easy it can happen, and you need to be aware and prepared for this type of scenario. In terms of not I mean, if you fall and die, you can't prepare for that. I mean, you have to try to not fall and die. You have to try to mitigate your risk, be prepared. There's all these things that you have to try to do to avoid this outcome. I'll just briefly give an overview of my day 2. I ended up hiking 18.5 kilometers, starting in the Aire de Bivouac and Refuge des Miages, and I ended up in Col de la Croix de Bonhomme, the peak or the summit there. It's not really the summit, it's the col, so it's just a pass, but it was quite high at 2479 meters. And this was the path that I followed. I went up to the Léoberge de Trique, which is a quite steep, short climb coming out of the Miage region. And then from there, you drop quite precipitously. You can see the profile in the lower image here, where I started. So this is the incline up to L'Auberge de Trique. That's a bit of a high point. It's not really, I would say, a pass. And then you drop quite a distance, and you have up to maximum gradient of 30 degrees. You then drop pretty much 600 meters, but it's over a relatively long distance, but it can be fairly steep into Lake Contamine. And I had a wonderful sort of brunch, because I didn't have any breakfast in Miage. I basically started hiking around 6, and then I had a wonderful brunch. I picked up some food at the local boulangerie. I had some quiche, ham quiche with a blueberry tartelette, and obviously my go-to can of iced tea. And so that was an interesting walk down. It's, like I say, it's quite long and quite steep in some points. After my brunch, I went from Lake Contamine to Refuge de la Balma, and that's pictured right here. On the way to that, you pass, so that's the refuge is here. On the way from Lake Contamine to the refuge, you pass, you're basically walking along a river. I don't know what the name of that river. It's probably just a runoff glacier river. And then you pass the Notre-Dame de la Gorge. It's a church. It's quite nice. There's a bridge you can walk over and visit it if you so choose. The river's through here, so you're walking on this side, and the Notre Dame is on the other side. So that's something you can have a visit with. And there's a section here where it actually is the profile is relatively flat, but that doesn't last for too long. And then you start to make your way from the refuge up to Col de Bonhomme. And again, you're climbing about 600 meters with maximum gradients of 31%. This section in here part of it is an old Roman road, and you can still see the flat slabs that the Romans had put on the ground to help with the with the carts and the army to march up it. Those still exist on the ground. You then travel up to here and then continue on up to the Col de Bonhomme at 2,300 meters. Again, it's going through here. It's quite steep at times, 31 degrees, which again for a hike is quite steep, and it's also very long. And then when you get to the Col de Bonhomme, you continue. It's not so steep, but it eventually ends at the Col de la Croix de Bonhomme, and that's where I used the narrow bivouac right beside the refuge. There's a refuge up here, and I was able to tent overnight in that location for free. It was quite cold that night. The temperature, it was the coldest night of the tour for myself. The temperature dropped to -5°C at that temperature, or at that elevation, pardon me. That's one of the reasons it was so cold. There were some people both sides of my tent. I think there was probably about 8 or 10 people camping in the field. And the person to my right, she didn't have really the proper gear, and she complained she didn't get any sleep in the morning. She said she didn't sleep at all because it was so cold. She had all her clothes on, two jackets. All her gear was on her, and she still was too cold. So again, you have to be prepared for these types of weather variations and temperature variations. So I would say in September, probably like -5 to 20 in the valleys, and -5 in some of the high passes overnight is what you can expect to see, which means you could possibly get snow. It does happen in September, even June and July and August. You still can get snow and hail in the high passes. So you have to be prepared for that. And in her case, she didn't have sufficient gear, and she couldn't sleep at night. I recommended her to take a hot water bottle, which really helps when if it's cool, you boil some water and put it in the hot water bottle in your sleeping bag, and you'll feel 100 times better. But she didn't have one with her, so that's what I recommended too. And this is Lake Contamine. Again, it's like Leuche. It's all the villages that are on the trail are tremendous. They're beautiful. They're well serviced in terms of food, and if you want to get some bite to eat or something, or supplies. There's probably a few hiking stores available, or ski stores to get some technical gear if you needed it. But in general, they're incredible stops. So it's great to restock your supplies for the next section. This here is the view from Col de Bonhomme. So you're looking out from the col, and this is the types of panoramic views you're seeing. They're tremendous. This is the Col de la Balme. So you can stop here and have lunch. You don't have to stay for night to get food here, and you can get some drink. I think the food it's not cheap, because they have to get it to the location, which is often remote and in relatively high locations. So they often have to bring it in by helicopter. So the selection may be a bit limited, and the quality may not be, it's obviously not going to be what you can get in some of the villages and the towns around the trail. But, and obviously, like I say, people are sleeping here at night. It is what it is. I'm not really a fan of staying in these, but they're quite popular, and they're usually booked 6 months in advance. So it's not necessarily easy to get a room here if you're without one. This is the view from the Col de la Croix de Bonhomme. at 2479 meters. It's similar to what you're seeing here because it's not too far away. But, you know, the spectacular views, and it's really, you know, this was the second day. I did better on this day. I went 18.5 kilometers. I was a bit concerned the day before that I didn't go far enough. I ended up ascending 1,500 meters and descending 620 meters throughout the day. So both of these numbers are up, and, you know, at the end of the day, that's a positive, and got me feeling a bit better about myself in terms of, not necessarily, I still wasn't convinced I would complete the tour at this stage. I was sort of taking it day by day because, you know, the thing is it's cumulative. So, you know, you might not have a great first day and the second day may be better, but, you know, when you're doing it day after day, it's a different story. So you have to, you know, still be quite cautious. And you know, getting used to these sort of ascents and descents, hiking them. You know, I think I started around 6:30 in the morning, and I ended up here at around probably quite late, actually 6:30. I did stay at I stayed at Contamine for at least an hour and a half or 2 hours, but it's still a long day in the hiking. And again, I think I went to bed around 7 and woke up at 6, so I almost slept another 12 straight hours. But that was my day 2, quite exciting, and a nice kickback from day 1 in terms of distance and elevation gain and drop. The weather was not sunny. It was basically partially sunny with some overcast clouds. I think by the time I got to this location, it was overcast. So there wasn't any rain, which was good, and I was able to get in a good day's hike. The other thing is, well, there was a dog, unfortunately, in the campsite, in the Aire de Bivouac. Like, some people bring their dog with them, and unfortunately this dog was quite protective of their owner, and, you know, the dog would start barking or growling at hikers as they walked by her tent, which, you know, it's not really fair. I understand it's nice to have your dog, but it's not really fair to other hikers that they're getting barked at or growled at by dogs in the campsite. It wasn't a large dog, you know, but sometimes small dogs can bite badly too, and, you know, it's not really fair that this dog was sort of aggressive in that manner. So I don't know what you do about it, but, you know, it was a bit off-putting. The other thing is, she let the dog go free, and the dog was starting to use the tents as a fire hydrant, if you like. And so you can imagine having to hike with a tent that's been covered in dog urine, putting that in your pack and then having to hike with it and open it up the next day. I mean, you know, this type of behavior is really, really, you know, sometimes people don't think about others. They just sort of think about themselves. And then the other thing, I did have breakfast in the morning in the refuge. Not this refuge. There's another refuge at Col de la Croix Bonhomme. It was quite pricey at 14 euros. What did you get? You got a small bowl of cornflakes, or it was like granola sort of mix with some warm milk. You got some black coffee. You got some quite hard bread, small hard bread, and then you had some jam that you could put on the bread, and that was the buffet breakfast for 14 euros, which I thought was, you know, it's obviously not the quality you'd be used to in some of the towns and villages, but again, this is a really remote location. To get any food up here, they were, I think every other day a helicopter was coming to take away the garbage and then bring food supplies. So, you know, it's quite pricey for them to do that, hence the reason it was 14 euros to get any food up to here. But, you know, I probably should have had some food with me, and I didn't really have like oatmeal, unfortunately, because they didn't sell it in Europe. I was hoping to buy some, but they don't actually sell oatmeal, you know, in sachets that you can bring with you to make oatmeal in the morning. And I didn't have any freeze-dried hiking food that I could boil in my stove at night too. So it was sort of my bad twice. And I ended up, like I said, I had the breakfast. It was, you know, it gave me some energy for the next day hike, which was good. But you know, I wouldn't say it was good value. I wouldn't say it was good taste. It was just, you know, it was a bit of something in your stomach sort of thing. So, and that, like I say, it was about 14 euro. What else can I say about that section? I think that's probably it. But overall, it was a positive day. Nice to tent outside in the open air. Even though it was cold, I didn't suffer at all. I had my down sleeping bag. I did put my down jacket on. No, not my down jacket. I put my merino wool shirt, long sleeve shirt on, and I put some loose jogging pants on, and I put smart wool socks on, and I have a red fleece cap. And I slept well. I wasn't cold at all. So that was my adventure on day 2. Overall, I think it was positive, and yeah, it was a nice way to end it. And that's the end of this chat. We'll pick it up on the next part 3.